Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Please visit audiblepodcast.com/gems for your free audiobook download. Welcome to the Genealogy Gems podcast, providing quick and innovative ways to make the absolute most out of your research time and creative ideas for sharing and displaying your family history. I'm your host, Louise Cooke. Hello and welcome to Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 132. This is coming to you in May of 2012. I'm Louise Cooke. I hope you're doing great, enjoying the springtime weather. I certainly am here, although I think I'm actually succumbing a bit to allergies. I really haven't had that problem in the past, but this year's been a little different, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but hopefully I will have a voice throughout this entire episode, and I'm happy to talk to you about family history and genealogy. Been talking to you about it on the Genealogy Gems news blog. Now, of course, being May, we are just coming to the end of the television season here in the U.S., and Who Do You Think You Are has been holding its own this year. And we just saw the episode with Rob Lowe. If you head over to the Genealogy Gems news blog, I've got some deleted scenes for you. This is kind of fun. You know, as you can imagine, they can't fit everything in every episode. And there are a couple of neat little clips there that you can check out. And of course, Rashida Jones is just around the corner. She's also from the Parks and Recreation show. So it's been wonderful to have another season, and we're all crossing our fingers to see if the show is faring well and going to be able to come back for another season. That would be terrific. Also, I wanted to say a quick thank you. You know, some of you guys have been very busy blogging lately, and let me look here. I've got a couple of shout outs that have happened lately that I wanted to thank you all for. First one goes to branchingouttthroughtheyears.blogspot.com. Did a nice little shout out about the Family History Expo that I attended in Houston, Texas back in April. And so they've got a link for you in the show notes to that. Also, appears to be a new German podcast. Now, of course, the problem is I don't speak German, so I don't know what he's saying, but it looks to me, my name has popped up and our podcast name has popped up in his show notes. So I've checked out the website and it looks like it's great. If those of you who are in Germany who speak German, you might want to check it out. It's at DER for Der, Genealogue, GENEALOGE, and it's .de, being a German website. So thank you so much. I assume you're saying something nice. I should use Google Translate and go find out what the show notes say. But I think it's all good. And I know that the podcaster there has also friended me on Google+. So you might want to go check them out. And also a blog post from someone who attended the Mesa Family History Expo. This one's called Going the Extra Yard by Emily Garber. And the blog post is entitled Cooking at the Arizona Family History Expo. And that's Cook with an E, of course. I'll have a link for you in the show notes to that. Emily was real sweet. Got a chance to chat with her for a few minutes in Arizona, and you might want to check out that little shout out that she did for us. I appreciate it. And finally, longtime listener and premium member, Jennifer of Gen on Gen. I love that name. Gen, Jen, on Gen, Gen. So it's genongen.blogspot.com. And she also gave a little shout out to the show. So thank you all. You've all been busy blogging. You're doing the right thing. You're putting it out there. And hopefully that's leading some of distant cousins and some people who might be able to help you out or just benefit from your knowledge. Hopefully those are coming back to you. So that's always nice to see. And let's see, others, of course, got to talk about FamilySearch when we're talking about family history. FamilySearch.org has recently put out an update on their 1940 U.S. Census indexing project. Now, this was launched in April of 2012 as part of a broad online community effort. Images and indexing projects for all over the states and territories in the 1940 census are now online. Of all the different types of historic records available to index, volunteers love census records the most, and it shows in the record-breaking levels of activity that FamilySearch has seen in the past 3 weeks. Now, here are some of the stats they gave us in their recent press release. Over 85,000 volunteers have already completed 20% of the census project. A record number of active indexers used the program in a single day. 34,947 volunteers used that indexing tool in one single day. And in one day, more than 3.2 million records were indexed and 1.5 million were arbitrated. Now, they want us to remember that this work is being accomplished by volunteers, and they just keep coming. Thousands are still signing up weekly. And as a result, millions of people are soon going to be able to search every name that was recorded in the 1940 U.S. Census. Won't that be nice? And of course, in addition to the 1940 census, they keep putting forward all of the other records they've been working on. And there is a current list in the show notes of the indexing projects that they're adding and the ones that have wrapped up recently. So you might want to check those out. Also have those for you at the Genealogy Gems news blog. And finally, if you haven't been to Pinterest lately, where have you been? Because it seems like everybody's on Pinterest these days. I am, and I've been pinning away. Oh, it is so addictive. I could just spend so much time pinning all those things we find online that we absolutely love. And I love it because I remember being in college and having not only a bulletin board where I used to pin all my favorite things to inspire me, but I even used to create these books. We used to get together with old magazines and cut out pictures of outfits or houses or places we wanted to go and all of our dreams. And we would cut these out and glue them into these blank books, I remember, and decorate them and you know, all that kind of stuff. So Pinterest is kind of the new virtual way to do that. It's a ton of fun, and it is now the third most popular social networking site. And of course, the social networking happens around sharing what your interests are, the things that you're pinning on your boards. So if you want to check out what I've been pinning lately, you can go to Pinterest, which is pinterest.com/source/genealogygems.tv. And those will get you some pins that I've been doing. And of course, I'm listed there also as Lisa Cooke. And I'm going to be talking more about Pinterest. I might even do a little gem segment on an episode here in the near future, because there are some ways to really take advantage of it, to even help you to keep your inspiration and track some things that you're working on in terms of genealogy. And there are some other alternatives to Pinterest as well. So stay tuned to the podcast for that, because we're going to be talking more about Pinterest. And of course, if you receive our free Genealogy Gems newsletter, which I hope that you do by now, my goodness, I've added a little Pinterest button. Boy, these social networking sites know they've hit the big time when they actually get their little button and you start seeing it everywhere. And Pinterest is that red button with the white P on it, and it's popping up everywhere you go. And certainly you're going to find it in the Genealogy Gems newsletter. That's the email that comes to you about twice a month. And if you would like to receive your free copy of that, head over to our website, genealogygems.com, and sign up there. You'll get a free ebook, which is doubly nice. Your first email is going to have a free ebook, which is the 5 fabulous Google search strategies for family historians. So you're going to want that. And then you'll get all the little gems that we include in the newsletter. And you know, it's funny, I keep saying genealogygems.com, but you know what? There's a new website coming. I am so excited to tell you that. There's more. I can't tell you everything now because it's not all done. And you know, as soon as you say what it is and what it's going to be when it's all done, something's going to happen. I don't know what that will be. So I don't want to jinx anything. I just want to tell you, if you've been having trouble viewing the website, and sometimes some of the text gets on top of some of the pictures and the browsers all see it differently, well, this website is practically ancient now. It's 5 years old. Can you believe it? And 5 years ago, browsers were a lot different. There were fewer of them. And certainly that was many versions ago. So we are working on a brand new website. We are really putting a new twist on things. And I'm very excited about it. It's going to mean some really cool new innovations for premium membership. So if you're a premium member, you've got a lot to look forward to. That's all I'm going to tell you. And it's cleaner and it's streamlined, and I just think it's going to be easier to use and certainly easier for me to keep putting the gems out there. So stay tuned. And of course, I think you're probably going to hear about this first and foremost in our newsletter. So you'll definitely want to sign up for the free newsletter. Okay, well, now I want to hear from you. We're going to do that over at the mailbox.
Bring me a letter from my old hometown, one with some jokes from my old pal Jim Brown. Bring me a letter from that girl of mine, saying that she's longing for me all the time. Bring me a letter from my proud old dad, who knows that we are winning, and I bet he's glad. But more than any other, a line from my old mother. Bring me a letter from my hometown.
Okay, well, here in the mailbox, I have an email that came in from Sterling. Now, Sterling is lucky enough to have old family photos, but he needs some help preserving them. Now, this is what he wrote. I've become a regular listener of your Genealogy Gems podcast, and I find that I'm enjoying it as much as any of the NPR radio shows that are my listening mainstays. I've learned so much from you over the past few months, and I'm deeply grateful. I have a question that perhaps you or one of your listeners knows the answer to. I have a family photo album, circa 1915, in which all the photos have been glued to black construction-type paper. I've scanned all of them, but I have come to realize that some of the photos with loose edges have writing on the back. In particular, some of these photos are photo postcards, and the writing on the backs of them would be as valuable to me as the images on the fronts of them. I'm a former photo technician, and I know that under many circumstances, it is safe to soak old photos in water to dissolve water-based glue. But in this case, I don't want to take a chance of water or steam dissolving the ink of the writing. Can you or anyone listening suggest a safe method for removing these photos from their old pages in order to recover the information that's on the back of them? Again, thank you for the many enjoyable and informative hours I've spent with your podcasts. Well, Sterling, thank you so much for your kind words, and thanks for your email. You know, to get an answer for you, I went straight to the source, the practical archivist, Sally Jacobs, who's been a guest here on the podcast in the past. She's at practicalarchivist.com, and she sent me a link to what she's written about those black scrapbook pages that so many of us have, and she actually wrote this in response to a similar question that she had received through Family Tree magazine. So I will have a link for you in the show notes for that article. You'll find it at familytreemagazine.com/article/saving-old-scrapbooks. Sally also wrote to me specifically about your problem. She says, my advice was to use interleaving sheets to protect the image side of the photographs from the acidic paper rather than deconstruct your ancestor's scrapbook. That advice still stands, but your listener has brought up one of the few exceptions to this rule. Information has been written on the back of the glued photographs. Now, that doesn't mean I'm giving Sterling a green light to soak his ancestor photographs, and to his credit, Sterling knows this. Water and photographs should not be mixed by anyone who isn't a trained conservator. Just to be clear, Lisa, I include myself on the list of people who should not mix photographs and water. I'm an archivist, and I'm not a conservator. For that, you need a BA in chemistry, an MA in conservation, and hours of lab experience. Why you should never mix photographs and water. Photographic images exist in a layer of emulsion on top of a piece of paper, and wet emulsion can smear or become separated from its paper backing. So, what next? What the heck should Sterling do? Well, assuming Sterling does not have the money to hire a conservator to do his work for him, I'm going to recommend a balanced test of sorts. How important is the metadata trapped on the back? Do we already know who the people are? Did the scrapbook creator do a good job of writing captions, information on the pages? If you can leave it alone, you should. all the photographs have already been scanned, and here I'm assuming Sterling knows enough to scan digital masters as uncompressed TIFF files, etc., which means, even in a worst-case scenario, you've still got the information in the photographs. Below is advice from Cornell for how to use just a tiny bit of water to dissolve glue holding a newspaper clipping. Please keep in mind that a photo print is more easily damaged by water than a newspaper clipping. Okay, enough caveats. Here's the advice from Cornell. And this comes from Cornell University, their library. And I'll have a link to this article in the show notes for you as well. It says, I have a scrapbook of important materials, including news clippings, programs, etc., belonging to my father from before the Second World War. Most of the items were attached to the scrapbook with either rubber cement or some other adhesive. How can I remove the items safely from the scrapbook? Can I remove the glue, stain from the back of the items? How can I stop the newspaper articles from further disintegration? The scrapbook format is difficult to process because of the different elements from which it's made. The adhesive may be water-soluble and simple to soak off. Try to isolate a leaf of the book with some plastic sheeting. That is, place a piece of plastic under the leaf to avoid damaging the leaf below. Place a damp piece of blotting paper over one of the newspaper clippings under a light weight. Leave it for about 20 minutes and then carefully, using a spatula, lift the newspaper from the leaf. Place the newspaper clipping between two pieces of dry blotting papers to dry. If the adhesive is rubber cement and resistant to water, try to carefully separate the piece of the leaf mechanically using a thin spatula or knife. Obviously, many of the pieces may be very brittle and you may wish to simply leave this in place. I think you may wish to consider obtaining a good photocopy of the clippings and save only the other artifacts. It is unlikely that you can remove the stains without some fairly complex treatment. And that's from Cornell University. So there you have it, Sterling, from the experts. And even then, the experts have their concerns about trying some of these things themselves. So in the end, it's going to be your choice. You could try and get in touch with a professional conservator and let them handle it. Or you could try some of these little test procedures and certainly take a look at the entire article there at Cornell University Library. My thanks to Sally Jacobs, the practical archivist, who always gets right back to me with some great advice and information. And you can get lots more preservation advice from her at practicalarchivist.com. Next up, I got a note from a listener in Denmark who wrote in again. She was talking to us about a popular Swedish TV show about family history, and she's written back because it looks like they're looking for contestants. She says, I have some exciting news about the Swedish TV show that I mentioned in my last email, Everything for Sweden. On this link, they are looking for new contestants for the second season. And I will have a link for you to this in the show notes. I went and checked it out yesterday, and it doesn't say that they've already done their casting. So couldn't hurt to put your name in. And even if they have got the second season, who knows, maybe they're looking for kind of queuing up for the third. So pretty interesting. Okay, I'll have that link for you in the show notes. She says, I'm still hooked to your shows. I'm around episode number 40 in your family history series. I have no clue to what I should do when they are finished. Maybe start over? Or the family tree series. I've taken up your advice on contacting long-lost family members. I still don't have the courage to phone them, but instead contacting them on email. So far, it has been a big success. I would never have done it if I hadn't listened to your show. So thanks. Love your podcasts. Please keep on making them. Well, I absolutely will. And okay, those of you with Swedish ancestors, this is your chance. I'll have a link again in the show notes for you to that information for the casting call for the TV show in Sweden called Everything for Sweden, which takes contestants to Sweden, puts them through various activities that allow them to experience a bit of what their ancestors might have experienced while living in Sweden before they immigrated. And the winner gets to meet their Swedish relatives that have been located through genealogical research. Wouldn't that be an adventure? And finally, I have an email here from Beverly. I always enjoy receiving emails like this one. And Beverly just wrote in just to say that she does love the show. She says, I'm a relatively new listener and premium member. I was bitten by the genealogy bug when I was about 12 years old, and now I'm a grandmother. I've been calling myself a reformed genealogist because the bug has been dormant for a while. I guess in trying to keep track of my grandparents' descendants, I've gotten discouraged with all the broken or never really joined families. In any case, I started listening to your podcast in part to get myself motivated again. It's working. But I've also gotten some wonderful unexpected bonuses. The first sent me to the library for Annie's Ghosts, a wonderful read that got me talking to my mother about family secrets. She agreed that all families have their secrets. Unfortunately, we were interrupted before I got any secrets out of her. Tonight, the treat was learning about Venice. Great podcast. I enjoyed the conversation and loved the family tree song. I bought it while I was still listening to the podcast. I'll be sharing their sound with Mom to see if she'd like to have them on her MP3 player. Thank you for all you share with your listeners. You have a real gift for communicating in a clear and personable way. I look forward to all your gems I have yet to uncover. Well, Beverly, you made my day. Thank you so much. How sweet of you to take the time to write. I know how busy all of you are, so that's always very nice. And I agree with you. Even to this day, Venice, the episode with Venice is still one of my absolute favorites. Love the family tree song. If you haven't heard it yet, you need to go to the archive and go listen to my episode featuring the band Venice. These are the brothers and cousins of the Lennon sisters. That's their little family connection. Well, thank you all so much for writing. And I've got more, but we'll have to save that for the next episode because coming up next, I have a friend of the show back to tell us about her new book, Bonnets and Hats. Just in time for spring. Yep, you guessed it. It's Maureen Taylor. She's here, and we're going to be chatting with her right after this.
Bring me a letter from my proud old dad, who knows that we are winning, and I'll bet he's glad. But more than any other, a line from my old mother. Bring me a letter from my hometown.
It's here, the new version 5 of the award-winning Roots Magic genealogy software. It makes researching, organizing, and sharing your family history easier and more enjoyable than ever. If you're looking to take the next step in your family history research and start recording your family tree in your own genealogy database, or if you've really been wanting to make a switch to a much more user-friendly program, then do what I did. I chose Roots Magic, and I'm really glad that I did. Throughout its 10-year history, Roots Magic has helped people research and share their family trees with innovative features like moving people from one file to another with your mouse, a source wizard to help you document your work, creating a shareable CD to give to family and friends, and running Roots Magic off of a USB flash drive when you're away from home. Roots Magic also received the award for easiest to sync from FamilySearch for their work in interfacing with that system. Really, what are you waiting for? Download your risk-free trial of Roots Magic 5 at rootsmagic.com. See why professionals and beginners alike choose Roots Magic at rootsmagic.com. I want to take this moment to thank our new sponsor, and that's Audible. If you're not familiar with Audible, Audible is the internet's leading provider of spoken audio entertainment. They have over 40,000 titles to choose from. If you have a genre that you like, they have it covered. If you go right now to audiblepodcast.com/gems, you can get yourself a free audiobook download when you sign up for the service. And if you're wondering which books to get with that free audiobook download, some titles you might want to take a look at are The View from Castle Rock by Alice Munro, or you could pick up Finding Oprah's Roots, Finding Your Own by Henry Louis Gates. And if neither of those genealogy titles tickle your fancy, don't worry, because there's 40,000 plus more to choose from. So again, go to audiblepodcast.com/gems. If you're looking for a way to date old photos and have a bit of fun at the same time, then this gem is just for you. I've invited my friend, the photo detective Maureen Taylor, to share some fashion history and photo tips from her new book, Bonnets and Hats. Welcome back to the podcast, Maureen.
Hey, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me on.
You know, I think the last time our paths crossed was in London at the Who Do You Think You Are live event. Tell folks what you were doing over there. You were busy.
Well, they put me in a ticket booth. It was like a ticket window. And then it was the oddest arrangement, but it did work. And people lined up or queued up, as they would say in England,
yes,
to show photographs and get some feedback on what they might be and avenues of what to do with them and things like that. And there was an hour and a half wait.
Oh, gosh.
From the beginning of the day until the end of the day.
And you went straight through, right?
I worked straight through. There were no real breaks, nothing. It was really intense, but lots of fun.
You know, when you say that, it reminds me of, I envision one of those machines where the woman's in the box and you put the ticket, the coin in, and she hands you a ticket with her fortune and you were telling the fortunes from the photos.
Pretty much. That's a good visual.
Yeah. Well, and I remember 2 years ago when you were doing the same thing and I was over there and I was getting a chance to chat with some of the people who were in line and they were really excited. They had some really cool photos. Did you have any that kind of stood out in your mind? You went, oh my gosh, how cool I got to see that.
Yes, there were some really interesting photographs. I actually got a woman on tape that I hope to use at some point on my website or actually on my Facebook page, and I have her photograph. So I don't want to give too much away, but it was very interesting. And I think we're trying to decide if it's two men or a man and a woman.
Oh, interesting. So not totally clear, huh?
Unclear. Definitely unclear. And then you see, things, the pictures in England are a little bit different. Men's clothing is a little bit different. Women's hats are a little bit different. And work clothes. You wore what you did. Like whatever your job was, you wore almost like a uniform of sorts. And so that's always fascinating. I've learned so much when I'm over there.
Oh, yeah. Well, and as I was going through the book, it looked like you were kind of concentrating on the bonnets and the hats. And, of course, the book is called Fashionable Folks, Bonnets and Hats, 1840 to 1900. And I was going through it. It looked like you were concentrating mostly here in the U.S., although I noticed I think it's on page 118, there's a nice couple from England. I imagine that a hat could tell you an awful lot about what country your ancestor was from if they happen to be wearing a hat in the photo. Have you thought about doing an international bonnets and hat book?
Well, perhaps. Although bonnets and hats and fashion in general is fairly similar in U.S. and in England. There are subtle differences, and, fashion in the 19th century really starts in Paris.
Right.
The American magazines call it Americanized Paris fashion. I don't know, on my Vimeo page, which is vimeo.com/photo detective, I actually have a video of a woman in a hat, and that particular hat identifies her because it's sort of cultural ethnic dress as a resident of Maison, France. And it's her hat that says it all.
Yeah, I imagine, particularly when they're wearing more of the traditional clothes. I have one photograph of my great-grandfather, and he's in his Prussian uniform, and the hat helps identify kind of what time frame he's in the Prussian army and what position he might have had. So certainly they tell you a lot. That would be a fascinating book to look at. But this one, I had so much fun going through this book because, well, first of all, I have to ask you, okay, with so many great old photos all the way throughout the book, how did you end up picking the 3 that are on the cover?
Good question. You know, what I did was I asked the designer, and I do work with a book designer, to give me 2 different covers, and then I put them on Facebook, and people voted. And then I sort of combined them. I really loved this green, but a lot of people voted and said they didn't like the green, but I went with it anyway. And because it looks good with the gold lettering. But picking the pictures for a cover it's really difficult. You're right. I have a lot of photographs, and I have a lot of great photographs in my collection. I have hundreds and maybe thousands and thousands of them. And I was looking for some photographs that would connect with the person who looked at the cover. So the little girl in the hat I just love because it's such a jaunty little hat. And she's got it tipped on the front of her head, and she's got pink cheeks. And the cover, you know, the book is basically black and white. As you know, it's hard to do color printing. It's very expensive, prohibitively so. And so the book is black and white, but these particular images on the cover are in color, and so it gives me an opportunity to show off some things that I wouldn't be able to do in the interior. Now, the woman on the far right of the cover, the woman with the grin on her face and the high ruffled collar and the hair sticking out from under her hat and the feathers and all of the things that are sticking all over her 1880s hat. I picked that one because I actually bought that as a set. There are 2 images of her, and I love her smile. I love the way she just really looks right at you. You could go up to her on the street and say hi, and she would reply, "Oh, hi, how are you today?" The second photograph of her, the photographer somehow enticed her to take off her jacket.
Oh.
So she's sitting there in her chemise.
Really?
With no hat and just all this lovely light hair-colored curls all over her head. And it was a society photographer that did it. So it's a very well-known photographer and wealthy, generally wealthy clientele because the photographer had offices in Newport, Rhode Island and New York City. But I just love her because she's smiling in both pictures, but in this one it's like I have a secret. I just posed in my chemise. It's very funny.
Yeah, you wonder which one came first, right?
You don't know. But, yeah, and then the men, I just wanted to include the men, and there they are, showing off their personalities with their tilted hats.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, some have top hats, but then the one in the back doesn't. I like that there was kind of a mix of what they might have been wearing. The woman, like you said, with the smile on her face, she has quite a bit of adornment, and I imagine, obviously, hats were such a fashion statement. I know that one of my husband's great-grandmothers was a hat maker. She ran a millinery shop in Minnesota. Fashion's just been a big business for a long time, hasn't it? I mean, they were spending a lot of money and shelling out a lot of money hundreds of years ago.
Absolutely. There were hundreds of hats per season. And you wore a different hat in the fall than you wore in the spring, and then you wore in the summer. And there were, you know, different color straw hats. I went to a historical society down the road from me, and they had in their restroom a display of all the hats from their collection. And there were these beautiful bright red straw hats that were made in that community. And there were black hats from mourning, and there were hats with real stuffed birds on them, because that was a whole industry. You could raise the birds in your house and then sell them to the hat industry, where they would kill them and stuff them to adorn hats, which actually sounds horrible. The Massachusetts Audubon Society got its start with women who were just wanted to put a stop to that killing of the bird business.
Interesting. Well, and I'm thinking too, as you move into the 20th century, all of a sudden they kind of stop. It seems like to me that they stop wearing hats in the photographs. You take your hat off when you come inside. And as I was looking through kind of some of your fun facts, it says here, in 1895, New York legislators introduced a bill to require women go hatless in the theater. So I imagine hats just kind of became somewhat of a nuisance. I mean, people started having to legislate against them.
Well, when you think about the size of the hats after 1900, those great big, huge picture-style hats, you would sit in a movie theater or go to the theater and you would leave your hat on, and the person behind you couldn't see. And, of course, you had those great big giant hat pins holding it to your head. But what was interesting was hairstyles influenced the design of the hats.
Oh, I imagine they had to kind of work around that, didn't they?
Exactly.
How interesting. Now, one of the really great things for the genealogist about a book like this is that we can then, you've got this through the decades, we can go through and look at the decades and start to look for similarities between the hats that you have listed here and the ones that we may see in our own photos. Tell us more about what can the hats worn in the pictures that we have tell us about the people and the times they lived in?
Good question. So it's all about the details in the hats. The type of trim, the size of the crown of the hat, the size of the brim. You look at all of those details and try to match them to the decade-by-decade grouping of hats. And so in this, I have a lot of pictures of hats because I've been collecting them for several years just to put this book together. And I try to select hat pictures, the sort of general hat pictures, not the very odd hats that one person might have worn or designed themselves, but sort of the general style of hats per decade. So you really can take your family photograph and look at these hats and say, oh, look, this has that big front brim and it has the big high crown and it has trim all over it, just like the woman on the front cover. This must be the 1880s.
Right. So it's going to help us date it. And I'm curious because some of these folks look like they're wearing quite expensive hats. Now, would we be safe to assume that perhaps they're wearing their best when they go take their photos, that this, while it might have some indication of their wealth, it also might be a little more than they really had on a daily basis?
Right. I mean, hats were different. I don't know about you, but when I was a little kid, we always had a hat for Easter Sunday. Mm-hmm. It was the only day of the year we wore a hat, other than in the middle of the winter when you wore something really warm. But our fashion hat was the Easter hat, and some of these women do wear very nice hats for the photograph, but also because it's very stylish. I mean, your hat went with your outfit; you matched it. One of the things I really wish I could do at some point is a book of color. I'm showing people what the fashion plates look like so that you can see how bright yellow was popular in a particular decade, or frog green was a popular hat, or bright fire engine red for a season. And that doesn't come across in these photographs. But your ancestor's personality also comes across in the type of hat they wore. So say they were a very conservative person. They probably didn't wear the most outrageous, most fashionable hat. They probably wore their favorite hat. It might not be even from the same decade as the rest of their clothing, but they got comfortable with it and they wore it. So there are little things like that that can stand out in a photograph.
Yeah, I think you're right. Color is one of the things that we lose. I mean, I'm looking at page 49, and there's a woman here from the 1860s, and I'm familiar with the fabrics of that time frame, and I see the plaid dress that she's wearing and the beautiful but very streamlined and elegant hat that goes with it. But this was very likely quite a colorful outfit. And I imagine that it's just something that we do lose track of. But just like today, which season and which fashions are in based on which colors are out.
Exactly. And there were fashionable colors for every season, and the colors changed because the wealthiest women always wanted to look the most fashionable. Same as today.
Right. We haven't changed much, have we?
No, we haven't changed much. We have our fashion icons just the way our ancestors did. And it's a lot of fun to look at these photographs and think, oh, why did she pick that particular hat?
Exactly. It gives us a whole new appreciation as we go back through our own family collection of photographs and see those kinds of things and really look for, like you say, it's in the details. Now, I know you've done Bonnets and Hats. Tell our listeners, this is just one of many books that you've done, and many of them, of course, featuring photographs. Tell us what else you've written.
Well, I have fashionable folks' hairstyles, 1840 to 1900. And people love that. They love to look. I've put in some kooky hairstyles in that one. And it's so popular and the response has been so great that I'm actually thinking of doing a follow-up to it with more 19th century hairstyles.
Oh, good.
I have a whole array of even odder hairstyles and beards that I've been collecting. I have something called Preserving Your Family Photographs. I have one on finding the Civil War in your family album, which is everything you'd ever want to know about photography during the Civil War, from clothing to how to find a photograph of your Civil War ancestor and what those little tax stamps on the back mean. Now, Lisa, I have to credit my mom with the hat book because when I came out with the hairstyle book, she said, well, that's a great book. I really like it. I love looking at the hairstyles. She goes, but why the heck didn't you do something on hats? A lot of people used to wear hats. I used to wear hats.
Right.
Do one on hats. So this is really for my mom.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, I was just thinking about, you mentioned the little marks that we see on some of these photos. As we're going through photos, do you recommend maybe doing some research on the photographers? Oftentimes they're stamped on the back, because you mentioned something about one of your photos, the photographer, well, I think it was the gal on the front, that he had offices in New York and in Rhode Island. So in a sense, the standing of the photographer might tell us a bit about an ancestor who could afford to go to that photographer or who would have selected them.
Absolutely. You should always research the photographer, and it's really, there's not a lot written on all of these different photographers because there were so many of them, but you can research them. I always say to people when I give a lecture on photo identification, treat these photographers as members of your family. Use city directories and census records and newspapers and research them and see what you can find out about when they were in business and where they were located even in that particular area, what particular area of town. Certain families went to the same photographer over and over again. People who immigrated to America often went to the photographer that was from their homeland. So it can give you clues as to where else to look or how this picture fits into the rest of your family history.
Wow, great tips there. Of course, first of all, like you say, the way to go about the research is just like you would with an ancestor. But I really like the idea that, particularly if you're not quite sure where your ancestor is from, that the people that they went to for services, like a photographer, if you can determine where they're from, that might get you one more clue to getting back over the pond. Great tip.
Exactly.
Oh, how
And you can
fun.
learn all this from a hat.
In a hat. There you go. And, of course, in Maureen's books. And now I was going to ask Maureen to read this wonderful little segment. It's on one of the final pages, page 141, and it's called Why Wear Hats? Which, of course, sometimes the question is you look at some of these hats, you think, what in the world were they thinking and why would you do it? But Maureen sent me a wonderful little video that I will have in the show notes for you, where she will read from that page and that writing. It's from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And back in 1899, they were wondering just about why wear hats and whether that was going to continue. So I will save that for the show notes. To get to the show notes, of course, you have to go to genealogygems.com, click podcast, and follow your way to this episode number, and you'll find the show notes there. And Maureen, tell us how we can find you when we want to get in touch with you about old photos and follow where you are and what you're doing.
Oh, Lisa, they can find me online at www.maureentaylor.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn, and, of course, Vimeo. I have 29 videos up there right now, so go ahead and take a look.
Wonderful. And you have a newsletter, right? Because I get that. They can sign up for that. That's free, and then they can kind of keep track of where you are and where you're speaking?
That's right. They can sign up for my free newsletter on any of those sites, Facebook or on my website, MaureenTaylor.com. And I also have this website called AskMaureenTaylor.com. So if you have a photo preservation-related question, that's the place to ask them. I was doing sort of like you, Lisa, a sort of monthly podcast. Mm-hmm. And then I was having some technical difficulties. So I now have partnered a little bit with a company called VoiceQuilt.com. And I'm doing preservation minutes that will begin to be uploaded to my Facebook page once a week.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, so much to look forward to. Maureen, as always, it's so good to not only cross paths with you when we're on the road, but get a chance to really sit down and chat with you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out.
Thank you, Lisa.
The other day, I was doing my usual trolling of the web, searching for new genealogy gems, and I found a very musical one that I want to close out the show with today. If you have a wife or a husband like mine who really isn't into genealogy, gather them around the computer or the iPod, because I've actually got something on the show that they're going to totally identify with. This is a very special song that comes to us from Michael Stewart, who's also known as the genealogy widower.
I get home from work to the same routine. I'm the one making dinner. My wife stares at the screen. I'm watching
you would like to listen to the song again or just play it for somebody in your family who's feeling a bit like a genealogy widower, head to the show notes because I've got a little media player there that Michael provided us with so that you can listen to the show and you can download your own free copy of it from reverbination.com/The Genealogy Widower. I'll have that link for you in the show notes. Thank you so much to Michael Stewart, a talented guy, and stay tuned because you're going to be hearing more from him here on the show. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the Genealogy Gems podcast. Always nice to talk with you. If you ever want to talk with me, I hope you'll drop me a line at genealogygemspodcast@gmail.com. You can also leave a voicemail at 925-272-4021. Thanks so much to Maureen Taylor for being here on the show. It's always fun to talk with her. You can find her online at maureentaylor.com. And if you would like a copy of Maureen's book, Bonnets and Hats, she has provided us with a discount code just for you. This is going to get you $4 off the retail price, and the coupon code is FJH889FZ. To use that, you'll need to go over to Create Space, which is an Amazon company. I'm going to have a link for you directly to get to it in the show notes to the listing for that book. It's at createspace.com/372-8379. Lots of numbers there. I will have them for you in the show notes. So if you'd like to get your copy of her book, you can do so and save that $4. Every bit helps. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, friend. I'll talk to you soon.